second round. How you doing, Wayne?
Good to see you, Mana.
Good to see. Today we're going to be talking about appraisal management companies. And before we start into that topic, I want to kind of go a little bit into your history, how you got into the appraisal industry, and just before we get into it. So please go ahead.
Hey, this goes back 40 years. When I got out of school in 1974, I knew that I wanted to be involved in real estate somehow, some way. And my goal was to work at Rampac, which is a REIT, an REIT sponsored by Bank of Hawaii. But there was no openings, and ultimately I never ever worked there, even though that was something that I really wanted to do.
You son of a gun. That's all right, we'll go off of this.
And the people Bank of Hawaii hired me and suggested that I start in credit.
Okay.
And eventually, when there's an opening in the real estate division, that they suggested that I could apply to work in that section.
Okay.
I did major in real estate finance when I was coming out of school, so the real estate financing was a perfect fit for me, and I really enjoyed working at Bank of Hawaii. And I had the opportunity to work in the construction financing and the tract and urban development area before I eventually made my way into the appraisal department. And actually, moving to the appraisal department was initially a temporary thing where I had planned to go back to the financing group. But I never ever made it back, and ultimately went into the appraisal industry.
Okay. You know, when people think about appraisals, they're just thinking about that person that goes out and kind of just looks at a house, see what's in regards to the residential side. But what we're going to talk about is a little bit built up on that, because in what we're talking about currently, and what we see is that just a gentleman comes out from the bank and they evaluate the property. But what you're kind of getting into is something that is is how banks deal with appraisals, right? Am I correct in that manner? It gives a better service for the appraisal, for the banks, right? Am I correct in that statement?
Are you talking about the appraisal management companies?
Yes.
The appraisal management companies really came to prominence after the Dodd-Frank Act. It's a federal bill that became an act back in the early part of the 2000 century.
Right.
The market peaked in about 2007 and 2008 in the last cycle. And because of the subprime market that collapsed, there was a lot of financial damage that was caused to many different groups that had invested in the mortgage paper, including complete communities that almost went bankrupt.
Right, we hear stories of these, right?
Worldwide, not just in the United States.
Oh, okay.
And part of the blame was on the relationship between the appraisers and the lenders.
Okay.
And they felt that the lenders had convinced the appraisers or coerced the appraisers, and the appraisers somehow agreed, either formally or informally, either directly or indirectly, to value properties to facilitate the loan process.
Okay.
And ultimately, when properties were foreclosed upon, the values weren't there. So as a result, the Dodd-Frank Act came about. And what they wanted to do was to be sure that the appraisers were independent of the lending process.
Right, right.
And because of that bill, we saw the rise of appraisal management companies. Companies that were independent of the lending institutions.
Right.
Companies or groups that were independent of the lending process, so that they would act as an intermediary between the lenders and the appraisers,
Right.
to prevent any type of coercion or undue influence
Right.
on appraisers overvaluing the properties to
Right.
help facilitate making the loan.
Okay, I guess in that sense, could you define to us exactly what is an appraisal management company then?
I'll do my best.
Okay. Well, give me your best. Give me your best.
The appraisal management company is an independent company. It's independent of the lenders and also independent of the appraisers.
Okay.
They receive orders for appraisals from the banks, and then they place the orders with in a panel from a panel of appraisers.
Okay.
And after they place the order, the appraiser does the work, delivers the report to the appraisal management company, and the appraisal management company then forwards the report to the lender.
Okay.
So it provides a independent group between the lender and the appraiser, so that the people
Yes.
can be confident that there was not any type of undue pressure placed upon the appraisers in preparing the appraisal report.
Right. Now you mentioned that it came out of
Dodd-Frank.
the Dodd-Frank, right? And that happened during the subprime debacle. You say it's a rise, so it almost feels like not everybody has adopted the appraisal management company concept yet. Not all banks, I guess, in this case. How are things being run as we speak of the moment? How are they doing it if they're not utilizing the appraisal management company?
Utilizing the appraisal management company will assure that there's independence between the lending process and appraisal process. However, a lot of the lending institutions in Hawaii have addressed that issue differently.
Okay.
And so if you take a group like First Hawaiian Bank,
Okay.
they have an appraisal department.
Oh, okay.
And that appraisal department is supposed to be acting independently of the lending function. So as long as that appraisal ordering and appraisal processing system within the bank is independent of the lending process, then it will meet the intent of the Dodd-Frank.
Okay.
Different groups handle it differently.
Right,
If you look at Bank of Hawaii,
Right.
they don't have an appraisal department.
Okay.
Yet they order appraisals in their particular situation.
Okay.
An administrative assistant or basically clerical help would place the order and receive the order and then forward it to the lending group,
Okay.
or the underwriters that underwrite the loans.
All right.
So although they don't have an independent appraisal group, they have one or two people assigned to the task of ordering and receiving appraisals that is supposed to be independent of the lending. Another group is Central Pacific Bank.
Okay.
Central Pacific Bank they have appraisers.
Right.
In fact,
They have their own appraisers.
they have one appraiser,
Oh,
a
okay.
review appraiser,
Okay.
and then they have some administrative help that administers the appraisal process. But basically, they do not function as an appraisal department. And so they have one appraiser who's basically a review appraiser, and then they have a administrator that orders the appraisals and receives the appraisals and then processes the appraisals that is independent of the lending function.
Okay, as long as there's somehow an independence between two departments is what was satisfied.
It meets the test.
Oh, I see. I see. And the benefit of having the appraisal management company is that you guys already embody that independence.
That is correct.
Right.
That's correct.
Right. So, in that case, I mean, how does having an appraisal management company help the lender in this case?
That's a very good question.
Right.
One, it assures that they meet the test and requirement of the Dodd-Frank, which is a federal regulation.
Okay.
But in addition to that, if they're a smaller financial organization, by having an appraisal management company involved, it allows them to, in essence, kind of have an appraisal department. Because the appraisal management function, at least if it's done properly, would have appraisers involved in the ordering and processing of the appraisals.
Okay.
And when a mortgage loan is made, usually the underwriting the loan has two primary functions. One, the underwriting of the borrower for the credit, and secondly, underwriting of the property.
Okay.
And if you have people ordering and processing appraisals, there aren't professional appraisers, then issues coming up with the property are being addressed by basically clerical help that may not understand the significance of certain issues that rise up from the appraisal.
Right.
But by having an appraisal management company, you can have a much greater sophistication relating to the underwriting of the property. And it affords a smaller organization to essentially have an appraisal department that can help and direct them with any of the issues or problems that come up related to the property underwriting.
Right. It almost seems like you could function as the appraisal department for every lending institution if they didn't have one.
Exactly.
Right,
For
and that's
people that
really good.
couldn't afford to have a department, can share the costs with other financial institutions.
Right. I always feel like it's almost kind of like where you those agencies that hire out work. You know, they I don't know how to say it. I forget. You know, temporary work where they put people in different areas to go work. Wherever
Staffing agency,
something staffing agency. Yeah, but this case it would be specific to appraisals. But it's the independence that we're looking at, right? And that gives...
That's the key.
That's the key right there. What other benefits can the appraisal management company give to lending institutions other than just the independence? I mean, there must be other intangible, what do you call that? Benefits to having the AMC.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Again, if it's done right.
Okay.
If it's done right, the appraisal management company can provide better quality reports.
How so?
If you look at appraisal management companies that might be originated in the locale,
Okay.
Under one system, let's say we take the island of Oahu.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you an example based upon Hawaii AMC LLC, an existing appraisal management company in Hawaii. They have only 2 appraisers assigned to a certain area.
Okay.
They have 2 other appraisers assigned to another area. We have another 2 appraisers assigned to a different area. So the island of Oahu is divided up into several different districts. And I'm going to use Windward Oahu as an example.
Okay.
There are 2 appraisers assigned to Windward Oahu for this company that runs from Makapu all the way out to Waimea Bay, all of Zone 4 and Zone 5.
Okay.
We only assign appraisal work to those 2 appraisers in that area. they're expected to know that area. They have to either live in that area or work in that area.
Mm-hmm.
They know that market better than any other market on the island. Both appraisers grew up in that market area.
Mm-hmm.
They have been in homes, different neighborhoods of their friends and relatives
Mm-hmm.
for decades. So when they get an assignment to do work in Windward, Oahu, they have a good sense of what's competitive and what's not competitive from one neighborhood to the next.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they live there, work there, and both of them live and work there,
Mm-hmm.
They watch that market closer than any other market.
Right. Right.
And they have an inherent sense of what the values are over and above the value of a property in Kapolei or Hawaii Kai.
Right. Right.
So even though their appraisal might be ugly, it may not look like it meets the standards. Inherently, they're going to gravitate to the right number.
Okay.
And ultimately, for these smaller lenders, what's the most important thing? Whether they met all of the individual tests for meeting the standards on appraisal, or if the value was a good number.
Right. Right. Because the lending institution, sorry to butt in, but the lending institution really wants to know if they're lending on something that is correct. I mean, and they're depending on an informed appraiser to give them the right valuation.
That's right. And are they so much concerned as to whether they properly define what market value is?
Right.
Are they particularly concerned about whether they included a paragraph related to their independence?
Right.
Or would their primary concern be, was the number good?
Right. Right.
And in these lenders, in fact, just about all lenders, not saying that meeting the standards aren't important,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately the most important thing is to them is, was the number good?
Right. Right.
And if you take someone who's doing an appraisal 3 blocks away from their house
Uh-huh.
versus an appraisal out in Hawaii Kai
Yeah.
or out in Kapolei, do you think that the quality of his work in terms of what the value is going to be
Right.
would be much closer to the true value than a community that he really doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
may not even understand?
I agree with you on that. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely do agree with you on that. Yeah.
So one, I firmly believe that the quality of the work, and when I say quality, I'm referring to the reliability of the value estimate,
Okay.
be much higher. But in addition to that, if you're an appraiser, there's certain requirements that you have to meet in delivering the report.
Okay.
So you're gonna probably have to take pictures of the comparable properties.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that you had an assignment 3 blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
You go out, you do the field work, you take your pictures, measure the house,
All right.
take your notes, come back, and then you find out that a property sold, just closed, that was an exact model of the house that you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and it was located 4 or 5 blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
So if the assignment was of the subject property, valuing the subject property, was not complete, and so you could go back out and you
Mhm.
could take a picture of that house in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But if the house was located in Kapolei,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to drive to Kapolei to take a picture of that house to include in the report. Or
Right.
you're going to have to drive to Hawaii Kai.
Right.
Now, the margins on the appraisal are fairly thin. So now the appraiser is sitting there, he's got to decide, do I go back to Kapolei? Just to cover the gas is going to cost you $50.
Right.
that's a small cost because the time is going to be 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. Sitting through traffic might be 4.
Could be longer.
Yes.
Mm. So as an appraiser, you got to say, well, there was a recent sale of the exact model of subject. If I include it, I'm going to do this job for a loss.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't include it, how reliable is the value going to be?
Right. Right.
Or alternatively, the third thing you could do is you could wait till you get another job in Kapolei,
Mm-hmm.
and then or Hawaii Kai, and then go take a picture of the property at the same time and include in a report. What does that do to the timing of delivery?
You delay delivery.
So the service could drop,
Right.
or the quality could drop if you decide you're going to use comparables that are different from that most recent, most reliable sale.
Right. Right.
So not only does it increase the quality of the work, but it also gives you better servicing. And it may not be with each individual job, but as a whole, and looking at what the appraisal management company can do, it allows for, over time, better servicing, better quality
Right.
for
right.
the institution.
You know, I think you touched on something that a lot of people don't really see, is that the appraiser, there's time spent, right? And I think you're saying these are the benefits that could be had if an appraiser came with us, because I think the appraiser has to engage into an appraisal management company. I think the management company has to bring that appraiser into the fold, right? Am I correct in that thinking?
Yes, we have a panel.
Okay.
Right? And that panel, and if we talk about Hawaii AMC LLC,
Okay.
we have 25 to 30 appraisers.
Okay.
But each appraiser is selected based upon their location as well as the quality of their work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys have your own internal panel that has requirements before you can come into the fold. I mean, you guys look at quality of work. Location is another big one, right?
It's a big issue.
Yes. Yeah.
And we give those appraisers a exclusive rights for certain areas.
Mm.
So again, if we go back to when we were at Oahu, any job that we get
Mm-hmm.
in that defined area, zone 5, zone 4,
Yes.
must go to those appraisers.
Must go.
Must go. That's our agreement with them.
Yes.
But in return, they have to deliver those jobs within a certain period of time.
Got it.
And but for them, they're doing work that might be, as I said earlier, 2-3 blocks away, or it could be 4 or 5 miles away, in a market that they know very well.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, it results in a lot more profitable job for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They have to travel less. It takes less time on the road. They're dealing in a market area that the research time would be significantly less because they know that market well. And they should be able to deliver the job faster
Mm-hmm.
at a better quality.
So we're looking at the benefits that appraisers in the AMC has. We're looking at the benefits that lenders have going with the AMC. What benefits do the borrowers have who ultimately receive, who are looking for lending on their part, if they're purchasing a house in that case?
Would the borrower benefit
Okay.
from a more reliable appraisal, a more precise number,
Mm-hmm.
from someone that knows that market better than anyone else?
So you're informing the buyer, or in this case the buyer, you're informing them, and they are a better informed buyer is a better buyer. I mean, somebody that's knowledgeable about what
They're going to get a better product.
exactly.
You can, all appraisals are going to look they're going to look the same.
Mm-hmm.
They use the same form. They
Mhm.
take pictures of the property. They sketch out the property. They use the same maps.
Right.
So how can you tell that one appraisal is better than the other appraisal.
Right.
For the consumer, they can't. They can't. But ultimately, they're going to get a better quality product because the person making the judgment, the person doing the appraisal, knows that market area better than anyone else.
Right.
And although his reports looks exactly the same as other guy's report,
Right.
his numbers could be different.
Right.
But whose number are you going to believe? The guy who lives in Hawaii Kai or Kapolei doing the work in Kaneohe, or the guy who just does work in Kaneohe that grew up and lives in that market area and is doing the job just a few miles away from where he lives.
Right. Right. The thing you don't want to have happen to you is that you don't want to rely on the wrong number. That would be a very terrible thing to do.
Yeah. And then to get the right number 3 weeks after you needed the job done is going to not help the lender. Or
Right.
not, I'm sorry, the borrower. The borrower or the buyer is going to need to have the report done so that he can close the sale within a time frame specified in the contract.
Absolutely.
And so timing is important to him. Timing and quality. And having an appraiser doing the work
Yes.
that really understands that market area is going to lead to better quality and better timing.
I like that. I like that. And how do I become a part of the appraisal management company? If I saw your company, Wayne, and I said, "Hey, I'm an appraiser in Ka'ava," and I'll be, do I call you up and say, "Wayne, how do I get into your company? Because I really love what you're doing."
This is what I would say.
Okay.
I have an exclusive with 2 other appraisers in that area. But if you're interested,
Yeah.
we'll put your application in file. Because if anything happens to one of those 2 people, we're going to need to replace them with someone. And we need to look at qualified appraisers that live or work in the area to add to our panel to replace them.
Right.
But we have an agreement. We gave them an exclusive. And unless they don't live up to their side of the agreement, we're obligated to send them the work.
That's good because, sometimes people either move away, they have to leave somewhere, or they, maybe something happens to them, they can't do the work anymore. So you have that as a continuous supply of people coming in and coming out. What do you see the future of the appraisal management companies in general? Is this something that's going to, all lenders will start relying upon from now on? Maybe smaller lending institutions will say, "I'm done with the appraisal department in my company. I'm just going to rely on AMCs now."
I firmly believe that if the lending institutions experienced working with a group like Hawaii AMC,
Right.
they would never go back to the way they're doing things. Never. People are entrenched in doing things the way they've done before.
Right. Right.
It's not easy to have them implement change. And from our calls on institutions, it's very difficult to convince them to do something different than what they're doing right now.
Right.
But I believe that once they see and experience the benefits of having an independent appraisal management company, there is no logical reason why they would not engage something like Hawaii AMC to do their appraisal ordering system.
Right. Right. I look at it as a way to save costs many times. If you have 1 or 2 people in a department, why not just go with the AMC?
Yes, it is less costly
Yes.
and more efficient.
Yes. and that's exactly what I would say too. I would say, why are we paying these people when that group over there is doing exactly what you 2 are doing? But you're right. Some people have been doing this for how many years? change is slow to happen many times, you know. And anything else that you could inform us about appraisal management companies, some things that we could look forward to, things that maybe I didn't cover in this discussion, this really nice discussion of ours, because I look at it as, let's inform people what's out there, you know, because there are great things that are happening.
I guess the only addition I would make is that in terms of expanding on the property underwriting,
Okay.
a lot of times an appraisal will be delivered to an underwriter.
Yes.
And most underwriters are versed more in qualifying the applicant, the borrower's credit, as opposed to the property.
Okay.
And our particular company, the Hawaii AMC, we utilize a review program that actually goes in and reviews the appraisal electronically.
Okay.
And it's the same program that's available to all of the lenders.
Mm-hmm.
The advantage of dealing with the Hawaii AMC is that you have appraisers looking at it. So when issues arise in terms of discrepancies with the report,
Mm-hmm.
as an example, say you're required to have the comparables be located within 2 miles of the subject property.
Okay.
A person that's not an appraiser would not recognize that requirement is almost impossible. Let's say that, take your situation where you had an appraiser in Ka'ava.
Mm-hmm.
There's not that many property sales in Ka'ava.
Correct.
And so to have 3 sales within 2 miles may not be a realistic,
Mm-hmm.
be able to realistically do that.
And even on the same thing, on the same token, sometimes in 2 miles there might be different characteristics in different neighborhoods
Yes.
that are so far away from that of the subject property.
And if you have an appraiser
Right.
reviewing this electronic review,
Right.
you can override a lot of the discrepancies, or you could add more issues that relate to the appraisal. So it adds for a lot more efficient and faster
Mm-hmm.
review, because a lot of times what delays the loan process is the review of the appraisal.
Mm-hmm.
Because when a underwriter finds something at issue with the appraisal,
Mm-hmm.
he's got to go back to the appraiser.
Mm-hmm.
The appraiser is not an underwriter. The
Mhm.
underwriter is not an appraiser, and
Mhm.
they're trying to communicate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so they send back information to the underwriter. It may be adequate, may be inadequate for his purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And that appraiser then, that underwriter then goes back to the appraiser. And then the appraiser goes back to the underwriter. So even though they might have received the appraisal report within an efficient period of time, the underwriting of the property and of the appraisal could expand to an unreasonable period of time.
So time lost then. A
Yes.
lot. Right. Right.
Within a contract, there's a specific amount of time that the sale needs to be closed within.
I meant to ask you when we were talking about the underwriting was how does the how can the AMC communicate, because the way it seems now is that the underwriter talks to the appraiser talks back to, and if I remember correctly, they used to email each other,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and can the AMC create a more is the AMC a lot more efficient on that communication?
Absolutely. And that's one of the advantages, because you have an appraiser, you have an electronic program that's reviewing it, and together with that program and the appraiser,
Right.
you can identify issues that are relevant and important, can do away with issues that are irrelevant,
Mhm.
not applicable.
Right.
Focus on the primary issues, get the appraiser to address it,
Mm-hmm.
and then move on.
So wow. Okay. Okay. So we have a lot of cost saving, time saving
Yes.
in this in having the AMC around.
Absolutely.
Makes sense. I would say, yeah, go for the ANC. You know, if I look at it along the lines, if you can save on costs, but there's intangible costs that are here as well, and there's tangible benefits of having an AMC.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Is there anything else that that we didn't cover about AMCs that I think would be very beneficial? I'm not sure. You might think of something that's very beneficial for AMC.
I believe
Yeah.
absolutely. If lenders really got exposed to it, I just don't understand how and why they would not go at this.
Well, I think institutions like that tend to be very slow moving on many things. Unless you have the 2008 debacle. But it's been a wonderful conversation with you, Wayne. Thank you so much. I know we had a little camera mishap, but that's okay. The conversation was awesome.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
That was good. That was fun. Yeah.
Thank you.